Hi everyone, this is Theodore Niker from Speaker Astrology, bringing astrology to life. And this is part 2 of the series of videos where we're going to be discussing and looking at charts for the use of the southern tropical zodiac in practice. So if you haven't watched the first video, go ahead and watch part 1. That's where I go over a lot of the discussion that has been happening, people's ideas about flipping the signs or not flipping the signs. As well as presenting some of my own chart example, just to get you started with what I'm trying to do here. So in this video, we're going to look at a lot of natal charts, and the angle that I took with it, obviously there's a lot of natal charts to look at, but during this video, I thought instead of concentrating on different aspects of the natal chart, relationship, children. One of the things that is pretty difficult to contest is the career path that somebody has taken or has chosen to take. And, you either get it or you don't. The chart should reflect that quite easily, especially for people that are famous or prominent. The chart points related to career should stand out as pretty obvious. So that's something that I wanted to test as one of the first things when looking at the charts in my research database. So let's get started. And just bear in mind that while there are many techniques to do with profession or what we would call vocation in the chart, one of the most prominent things is to look at the sun or the ruler of the sun, and another point in the chart called the midheaven. Now, because the sun and the ruler of the sun are pretty non-specific for everyone born in that month, yes, the house location would be dependent on the birth time, but I felt it a little bit more general. So, and that does come into play in some cases that I found, but the examples that I'm going to illustrate here today with you are going to be focusing on the midheaven point, which is the intersection of the sun's path during the course of the day with the prime meridian. And by definition, that is going to be the point in the sky looking towards midday for wherever you are, where the sun reaches its maximum altitude in the course of its motion during the day. And it indicates the place of solar noon. So it's got this midheaven point, in the chart it's called MC, has this feeling about prominence to it. So especially for people that are prominent and that have a career path that's very obvious, it would stand out as something pretty definite to look at. So we're going to look at that point, the 10th house, the midheaven as defining the 10th house. So we're not going to be looking at the perspective from whole signs as a house system here, because I feel the house system actually shows the manifested reality of somebody's career, especially if they're negotiating a lot with other people in the world to manifest it. So there's a whole other video I can do about the difference between the 10th house and the 10th sign and their rulers and what that means for vocation, but maybe I'll do that at another time. So for this video, just know we're going to be talking about the midheaven point as the beginning of the 10th house, typically, traditionally showing the prominent activity of the person, and in most cases, that's going to be the profession of the person. So let's get started. And again, I'm going to be showing you the charts in both, let's start the slideshow. Dun, dun, dun. Right. So just to remind people that this is the model that I'm going to be using to discuss astrology in general, because this is the way I practice, and just to sort of put my bias out there, or my perspective of how I practice astrology out there to you, is that I do practice Vedic astrology, and that's a fixed paradigm because it uses a sidereal reference frame, a non-localized perspective from starlight point of view. And Western astrology, Western tropical astrology at least, using the tropical zodiac, I see it as close to the Earth. It's a more fluid paradigm, as I'm going to be demonstrating here. The point is that the southern tropical zodiac or the tropical zodiac is fluid across the equatorial hemispheres. So that is a localized sunlight within our solar system viewpoint of things. And so therefore, I believe it is more fluid in that way, being a seasonal / directional paradigm. But we talked about that in part 1, so please go and watch it. So let's get into the charts. And yes, this is a more holistic form of astrology, I think, because it's taking into account both a fixed and fluid paradigm. All right, so this is chart number 1. This is a client of mine that works in sales, but they started off working as a clerk in a sugar manufacturer plant in South Africa. They've risen up the ranks very quickly in that. They've been administrative roles, very, very strong in their career path. And now they're working for the same company, but in the division where they're doing a lot of research and development, innovation, especially in the area of food technology, and specific enzyme production, new enzyme apparently that's to do with the food industry. It's going to change the food industry in some way. So I've got the northern tropical chart on the right-hand side and the southern tropical chart on the left-hand side. So I'm going to start off with the southern tropical chart on the left-hand side, and here you can see that if I move all these, so hopefully you can see my, oops. Okay, my spotlight, there we go. Right. So the 10th house here, the midheaven is Virgo. That is showing, clerical work, analytical work, needing to be organized, classified. That would fit more with a more structured clerical work environment. Now, interestingly, Venus represents sugars, and Venus traditionally, Venus is also on the midheaven. Now that is both the case in Venus is on the midheaven in both charts, so we can't use this as a differentiating factor. But the environment being analytical and clerical is much better represented here by Virgo on the midheaven than having Pisces. The ruler of the midheaven is Mercury in Virgo, and that's also very strong. Mercury is the ruler of the sun sign in this chart, indicating the activities through which this person can become recognized and get promotions and things like that, because that's what the ruler of the sun is also about. Now, you'll also see here that there's a strong trine from Uranus in the sign of Taurus in the 6th house. And that, for me, was straight up innovation, food technology that is assisting in the career. It was having a very unimpeded influence in the career path of the person. And that was really strong. And so they're very good in business. They're very good with sales. The ruler of the 9th house is the sun. And they have a very strong moon in the 7th house, which is good for somebody who's wanting to reach out to people and make money, okay? To make productive partnerships with people. So that would be helpful for business. If I look at the northern tropical chart, I've got exalted Venus on the midheaven, and the ruler Jupiter is in Aries. That doesn't really speak to me as a clerical job, okay, highly administrative job, all right. It has a trine from Scorpio, Uranus to the midheaven degree. So that also doesn't fit, enzyme production, innovation in the food industry. I thought that this was the southern tropical. When I flipped the signs, really it became quite evident what this person is doing. This person is born in Durban in South Africa in the Southern Hemisphere, for those of you who don't know. So using the normal tropical zodiac that is usually output in software, doesn't, it follows the northern tropical, i.e. the northern seasonal reference, doesn't really match up to what actually has happened in this person's life. And this person has been working for a very long time. So, they're in their 40s. So, yeah. All right, chart number 2. This is Edwin Naidu, and he's a journalist, an award-winning investigative journalist in South Africa. So if we look at the northern tropical chart, you have Taurus, Venus on the midheaven with the north node. That's more towards the arts, hey, and to do with the body and food and sensual and accessories and maybe even financial matters in a way. So one would probably say if he were to become more global with his work and start working with people and companies in the Northern Hemisphere, he might go towards a more financial, situation with the work that he does. Venus does rule the third house of communication here. So in the Northern Hemisphere, it would grow, I would say, very well. But what is he doing? He's not starting off with, normally people would say Taurus Venus is something artistic, something more grounded and down to earth. It's got an aesthetic vibe about it first as an archetype or as a significator. It doesn't really strike you as investigative journalism, which can be quite cutting, behind the scenes detective work, research, digging deep for details. That is much more captured here with the midheaven in Scorpio. The ninth house ruler is on the midheaven, which shows that yes, for his work, he might be exposed to travel. Okay. And then if he travels to the northern hemisphere, then the northern tropical chart would kick in, furthering that success. But you have Scorpio here, investigation, detection work, digging deep, undercover, those sort of themes playing in to the professional profile. And the ruler of that 10th house is a Mars in Aries in the third house of communication. That is a very strong statement of success through communication, but it's a Martian archetype of communication, which is journalism. You're cutting deep, you are really getting into people's, the investigative side of Scorpio is very strong with the sort of Mars ruling the 10th house. Mercury also does have a connection to the midheaven. And for someone who's an award-winning journalist, you would expect a good Mercury, strong Mercury to have an influence. And this is an exalted Mercury connected to the midheaven by sextile. And that is also important from the 8th house cusp, again, deep investigative journalism. So having a Pisces Mercury connected to the midheaven in Taurus with Venus in Taurus really doesn't really strike me as obviously something in journalism. With the energy here in the southern tropical zodiac of Mars and Mercury coming together with this midheaven in Scorpio, that makes more sense to me. Okay. And he's had success abroad as well. So you would say the 9th house needs to be strong. Well, here you have the 9th house ruler on the midheaven, that's Venus. You also have planets in the 9th sign here, very strong. You have Saturn that's exalted. And this is not just anything here because Saturn, is the ruler of the chart. Now, I'm not going to focus on the Saturn-Sun conjunction here as a qualifier between the two zodiacs because it's neither here or there. In this system, the Saturn is exalted ruler of the ascendant. And in this tropical zodiac, the northern tropical zodiac, the Sun, the ruler of the ascendant, is exalted. So it's very difficult to differentiate them at the outset. But clearly, and more obviously, again, the midheaven, Scorpio midheaven, investigative, journalism, third house, Aries, Mars, exalted Mercury connected to the midheaven, very, very strong indication there. Next chart. This is the natal chart. And by the way, all these charts are AOA rated. So the data is available on Astro Databank online. Okay, so this is a chart of Kirite Kanawa, and she's quite a famous, a world-renowned, really known in the world of operatic singing from New Zealand. She's known for extensive range and styles, and if you've listened to her sing, it really strikes. It really hits you. It's very, she's got the structure down really well. So let us have a look at this chart. So we're looking at opera singer. So the Northern Tropical chart shows us having an Aries midheaven with Mars, the ruler of that, in Gemini in the 12th house, conjunct Saturn, arguably on the ascendant. It's difficult for me to really say this is an opera singer that's having great success, because Mars is not an archetype for an opera singer, generally speaking. You could say that Mars also rules the 5th house, but again, conjunct Saturn in Gemini as an opera singer, I'm not too sure about that. It's a bit, we wouldn't go to opera singing as a first pass if you saw this without knowing that she was a singer. You'd be say something more action driven, more industrial. Saturn Mars conjunction with the ruler of the midheaven there on the ascendant. But if we go to the Southern Tropical chart, you can see here that we have Libra on the midheaven, which straight up is Venusian, impact with people, okay? Social impact, social grace, all of those themes coming through. And Venus, the ruler of the midheaven, is in Leo, of theatrics and creativity and being on show. And it is the Venus that is also sextile the midheaven. So that's also very, very strong. And in this chart, the Venus also rules the 10th house. So I think this makes more sense to me, having the midheaven and the 5th house, Taurus, being ruled by Venus, and the Venus is in a highly expressive sign of Leo, and it is connected to the midheaven degree. So I think, again, the Southern Tropical seems to be indicating the career pretty obviously and pretty straightforwardly, if you think about it in that way. If we go to the next chart, this is the chart of Bruce McLaren. Bruce McLaren is again, New Zealand-born race car champion. All right. So if we look at the chart in Northern Tropical, we have Libra on the midheaven, and ruler Venus is in Cancer conjunct Pluto in the 6th house. That doesn't strike me as a race car champion per se. That speaks to somebody who's deeply involved in the arts and communities of people, with the work that they do, having social impact in that way, one-on-one with people, possibly through a service or business that they're doing, because it is around the 7th house cusp. That I would feel more comfortable going with, especially with the connection to the Mercury, all right? But if we look at the Southern Tropical, you have the very active and forthright Aries midheaven, ruled by Mars. And Mars is in Gemini. That, to me, makes more sense for a race car driver, okay? And a race car champion at that as well. So that seems to really capture the zippiness when Mars and Mercury come together. For someone who's having success, it's in the 11th house, it's with the North Node, okay, in the 11th house. It's their plug into the public and wider communities of the world. So that for me is much more clearer as an archetype for the career. If I was seeing this person and I didn't know what their profession was, and I saw their chart in Southern Tropical Zodiac, which is here on the left, I would straight up go towards Mars in a Gemini function, which is speedy, words, fast-moving archetype, which is very, very strong. All right. If I go to the next chart, this is Keith Holyoake, again, a New Zealand farmer, agriculturalist, and he was Minister of Agriculture in the New Zealand government for many years, very actively involved in agriculture organizations and firms all across the country. In the northern tropical, you have Scorpio on the midheaven, and Mars is in Pisces, ruling that. Mars is trining the midheaven. Okay, that's not really speaking to me of farming per se, or someone really being political in that sense. But here in the southern tropical zodiac, looking at the chart in this way, you have a Taurus sign on the midheaven, which is pastoral. One of the things of Taurus is to do with the earth and farmland. Pastoral land is a Taurus thing straight up, okay? And that's ruled by Venus in Cancer. So that's also to do with the land and home and the home country and patriotism and those themes. And you actually have an exchange here between Mercury and the Moon from Gemini and Cancer. But again, bringing those themes to bear. You have the Venus again here connected to the midheaven, showing an assistance with prominence. You have a Sun in Leo with Saturn a Sun in Leo that is connected to the midheaven, also showing prominence, maybe perhaps getting into government. So I think that is more straightforward to me, rather than going with Scorpio midheaven Pisces bars as the archetype for this person's career. I mean, they've been in government, in agriculture for their whole career. This is someone with a very stable and long career over decades. So that just shows the security of the ruler of the midheaven here being very well placed and connected to the midheaven. Okay, so that is showing, again, very, very evident and straightforward. I don't have to think much about it. And that's how astrology should be. If you're looking at charts, you should say, okay, Taurus midheaven, Venus in Cancer connects to the Taurus midheaven. Okay, do something domestic, do something with the land, do something in your home country. You don't even have to move very far. Okay, and that's what has happened with this person. And they have a Virgo Mars trining the midheaven now, which makes more sense from an administration point of view, clerical point of view, how they've managed the finances pertaining to their career and the department that they've been in. But again, very clear, agriculture, Taurus, pastoral line, Taurus, is very clear there. It's direct, it's obvious. The next chart, this is the chart for Ian Thorpe. He's a famous Australian swimmer. He's won 5 Olympic golds. I think in his career, he's won over 30 Olympic golds in various competitions across the world. So if we look at the chart, so we're looking for someone, fast. He's known for his speed in the water, okay? So if we look at the northern tropical, we have Libra stellium, Venus in Libra, Mercury in Libra on the midheaven. That is totally on the artistic side of things, okay? The social involvement side of things. Very, very strong with that. Venus during the 5th house, you would go towards creativity in the arts or humanities or social sciences, something along those lines with the 9th house ruler Mercury in Libra as well. That would be a very strong Libra, very clear Libra signature. I'm not seeing Mars, I'm not seeing zippy, I'm not seeing, what you'd expect for an athlete of that success and stature. If we go to the southern tropical, where the signs have been flipped, because he's born in the southern hemisphere, you straight away see there's an Aries Mercury on the midheaven. Again, Mars Mercury coming together is very quick, very fast. All right. Not only that, there's a stellium in Aries, but why that becomes extremely powerful in this case is because there's an exchange. Mercury is in a sign of Mars, and Mars is in a sign of Mercury. So it's as if this Mars is in Aries, and it's as if this Mercury is in Gemini. It's a very strong connection between Mars and Mercury here in this chart. You can see that the Uranus is connected to the Mercury in the midheaven by sextile. That could also help, but I wouldn't, just because Uranus is sextiling the midheaven in both cases, I wouldn't say, this person is an athlete per se. Just that one fact, I wouldn't really go there. But what I would say for sure is that, wow, having Aries midheaven with Mercury there and ruling Mars in Gemini, that for me is also really, really a strong statement of someone who can be a very strong athlete, especially since this midheaven, this Aries Mercury, is squaring the nodal axis as well. Okay, it is square the nodes of the moon. And that's very important here because something squaring the node of the moon is important for someone whose chart ruler is the moon. Okay, so again, very, very important archetype here with Aries stellium coming through. Now, this is the chart, the transit chart for the day when he came out as a homosexual. Say that's his sexual orientation. He had, I think, been keeping that under wraps for a very long time. So you can see here that the Mars and the North Node by transit was on his natal Saturn at that time. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, the North Node coming to the Saturn is ruler of the 7th house in the natal chart in Southern Tropical. So it's something that is about his relationships, and this is a debilitated Saturn in Aries, all right, that he's having to come out with. It was a sore point. It wasn't really, it had a long time obviously dealing with that because it had taken him a long time to feel okay to come out with that. That Aries Saturn, feeling lack, a whole lot of esteem issues linked with that, confidence issues linked with that. But the North Node is meeting that. So it's going out into the public. His 7th house matter is going out into public. The other thing that's important here is the Mars is there. Mars, yes, rules the 10th house, but also Mars, more importantly, rules his 5th house of sexual activity. So that's you seeing adjoining again, something public about his sexual activity and sexual orientation. The ruler of the 5th house by transit is on the Saturn, the ruler of the 7th house, with the nodal axis, and that's very strong. It was a public statement. He took ownership of it. That is the Aries Mars that is there. He took ownership of that, and that's what it came out as in public, the nodal axis there. Now, if you were using Northern Tropical, you would say, well, Saturn rules the ascendant and it's exalted in Libra, showing a relationship matter. But then Mars in Libra will show it doesn't go very well. Mars rules the 11th house then. It wasn't an 11th house matter coming to public. It was a 5th house Scorpio matter coming to a public arena at that time. So, but he played it very well. He's come out very well after that. The Mars is in Aries here. So, and again, remember, natally, from a Southern Tropical point of view, this Mars is very strong. See, the Mars rules the 10th house, and it also rules the 5th house. So while he's getting success in the 10th house, he at the same time had pressure about his 5th house matter at the same time happening because the same planet is ruling both those houses in the chart. And that's much more clearer, in my opinion, in the Southern Tropical Zodiac here. This is another chart. This is Michael Kirby. He's an Australian High Court judge, a very high profile. We'll wait for the aeroplane to go by. All right. So Michael Kirby, he's an Australian High Court judge. He's a high-profile human rights activist and law reformer. So if we look at the chart in Northern Tropical, okay, we are going to have Aries midheaven, Mars in Sagittarius. I guess you could say that is to do with the law. But usually with Mars in Sagittarius, you're going to look at adventure sports and things like that, or missionary type of activity, being in the sign of Jupiter, especially with the Pisces Jupiter, is really not, it's got a very strong idealism vibe towards it in the 7th house. Okay. Um, I mean, for someone who's going to be a high court judge, they must have a strong Saturn. Okay. And lawyers need to have a strong Mercury too, because that's what they do. It's all about Mercury. They write, they debate, they fight with their words. Um, and here you see Saturn, the ninth house ruler, is debilitated in Aries. I mean, it doesn't look to me as strongly someone who would, find the law and the rigidity of being a high court judge a very, very a happy sort of circumstance for them. Especially since the ruler of the chart, the Mercury, is with the debilitated Saturn so I don't think, even though it is a day chart, is it insect and all of that, but I still think that that would be difficult, to rise up to the level of high court judge even, it would take some time. And he's had quick success. Whereas here in the southern tropical, I think things are much clearer. You have the ninth house ruler Sun in Virgo. You have Jupiter in Virgo. All the planet. I mean, the ruler of all these planets in Virgo and the ruler of the Mars is the Mercury, and the Mercury is in Libra, conjunct an exalted Saturn. That makes much more sense to me as someone who would, rise to prominence, in their field of sorry, the midheaven here should be Libra, not Virgo. So that's very strong. The ruler of the midheaven is Venus, that is in Leo, connected to the Mercury in Libra. So, and by association, connected to the Saturn exalted. So the Venus is in the ninth sign, it's connected to Saturn exalted. I mean, that's very, very strong. This whole connection here of the ninth house with the 10th sign and the 10th house is very strong up here, this quadrant. These three houses are very strongly connected to one another. Whereas here, the ninth house ruler is in Aries, it goes to the seventh house. I mean, it's okay, but it ends up with a Jupiter Pisces archetype. Doesn't sound to me like someone who's very strong in the courts. Having a very strong Saturn makes more sense to me there. I mean, for me, that was the deciding factor. And Libra being about justice and fairness, especially with Saturn being in the sign, it's going to have more of a Saturn justice vibe about it, rather than have the Venusian vibe about it. As an artistic profession, Venus in Leo is not going to have as strong of an influence as Saturn, who is, for the most part, an Newton of Libra, and has more dignity in Libra than Venus does. So that would, for me, would move the Libra signification more towards justice and fairness, especially, he's a high-profile human rights activist and law reformer, so I think that makes sense to me there as well. The ability to do that, the capability to carry out those things within an establishment environment is the great essential dignity of the Saturn here, in my opinion. With the Mercury obviously very important, ruling the Sun, Jupiter, and the Mars. Okay, so I think this whole sector of the chart, from Mars to the Sun, all comes back to this Mercury conjunct this exalted Saturn, with a link to Venus. So I think, for me, that's more clear. There's a fairness and justice profile of Libra versus the Mars in Aries, Mars in Sagittarius, connected to a Pisces Sun archetype. It doesn't feel more like justice. Whereas here, you've got, yes, the Mars in Gemini connected to the Sun in Virgo, and a lot of Virgo has to happen for being a lawyer. You've got to know your cases. You've got to read a lot. Your Mercury must be strong. Okay. Here's another case. This is Maria del Rio. She's an Argentine singer and actress. I'm not sure why I put down there she died from an angina attack, but okay. Let's see. So she's a singer and an actress. So let us have a look here. Here you've got, let's look at the Northern Tropical. So Northern Tropical, what we have here is we've got a Pisces midheaven with Jupiter in Scorpio conjunct the moon, debilitated with the South Node in the 6th house. See, I'm not quite sure about that, being a singer and actress archetype. It does have Uranus Mercury connected to the midheaven, but that's true for both charts. So I'm not going to take that into account. Here, the ruler of the chart is Mercury in Capricorn. Doesn't really strike me as someone who would go for being public and being an actress, and a singer. Want some Venus happening, debilitated moon, the ruler of chart in Capricorn. I mean, okay, we'll see. In Southern Tropical, the midheaven is Virgo and is connected to Uranus, Mercury in Cancer. Venus is also in Cancer. There's a Cancer stellium. And there's Venus and Moon, yes, they are connected by sextile even in the Northern Tropical. But here what you can see is that the Moon is exalted. The Moon is in a sign of Venus, and Venus is in a sign of the Moon. So for me, that makes a big difference, because the Moon and Venus are very strongly connected in their own signs or from each other's signs. So for me, the feminine archetype here is of the charts. The Mercury Uranus connection here is also very strong connection to the midheaven. So maybe that would get the voice out. Maybe that is the acting. Maybe Mercury is important for acting. But I think having a much more stronger feminine chart would support someone going towards feminine kind of connection, involved with people. You're singing, you're acting, you're on display, rather than having Scorpio, Capricorn, moon debilitated. I'm not sure about this Northern Tropical situation for someone who's had such very good success with people, in general. So I'm not too sure about that. Right. I suppose I put the angina attack thing here because the ruler of the 6th house is Venus, and it is with the sun, which is to do the heart. And the Venus is in the 8th sign, on the 8th house cusp, indicating, death. And that would follow from an angina attack as well. Okay. But it's open there for people to look at and discuss and think about. But I feel like having a much stronger Moon-Venus situation with the sun it just makes more sense to me for someone who's a singer and an actress in that way. Okay. Not to say that people who are singers and actresses can't have Scorpio, but the types of roles that she's taken and the type of personality is much more open in that way. Here you have the ruler of a chart as Mercury Capricorn, and in the Southern Tropical you have the ruler of a chart is Taurus Jupiter with the Moon exalted, connected to Venus. That's very strong with the Sun. Over here, the ruler of the chart is with a luminary, and the luminary is exalted, and it's connected to Venus, which is with another luminary. So that's much more, a much stronger case for prominence. This is the chart of Pope Francis I. He is born in Argentina. And, okay, so I think people have looked at this chart, but I'm going to look at it again with the Southern Tropical Zodiac, because it's an interesting case, because he was born in the Southern Hemisphere and then he moved to the Northern Hemisphere where he found the prominence. So normally what I see people saying about this chart is that, oh yes, he's got a Sagittarius sun with the South Node, which is inclining him towards ecclesiastical service. And it's got Saturn in Pisces in the 9th sign, 8th house, or renunciation for some spiritual cause. Okay, makes sense, fine. And he's got Jupiter in Capricorn debilitated. Okay. I mean, I suppose that makes sense. The ruler of the midheaven is the Venus, and the Venus is with the moon in Aquarius, but isolationist. Um, Venus and Uranus, you could argue, have an exchange here. Uranus is in the sign of Taurus, Venus is in the sign of Aquarius, which has resonance with Uranus, depending who you talk to out there. So there's a connection there with Uranus to the eighth house, eighth sign. Not too sure, but for me, someone who needs to go into ecclesiastical service, the ninth house ruler must be strong, all right? The ninth house ruler here is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in detriment in the sixth house. That doesn't, I mean, traditionally we know that Jupiter is about religion and ecclesiastical involvement. But okay, the Jupiter is not strong, that's what I'm saying. It's cadent and it is debilitated in a night chart. So doesn't really strike me as someone very strong with the ninth house. Yes, strong Jupiterian themes, yes, but Jupiter is in detriment, out of sect, and cadent. In the southern tropical, if we flip the signs, we have basically everything becomes ruled by Mercury now. Saturn, you have, again, the other side of service, which is Virgo, which is more of a I'm serving and maintaining at the same time archetype in the ninth sign, eighth house. And curiously enough, this Saturn rules the chart now. So this ninth sign, eighth house Saturn life path becomes extremely important now because they are going to go that way. Saturn now rules the chart. You have the Mercury who rules the Saturn and the Sun and the North Node on the angle of the seventh house, and it is Cancer. You have Jupiter, which is now exalted. It's not detriment or debilitated, and he's not in fall anymore. You know, he's exalted. And for someone who wants to rise in ecclesiastical service, having a Jupiter exalted with a very strong Mercury controlling, ruling the Sun and ruling the ruler of the chart is really, really strong. Okay, that's a very strong Mercury Jupiter connection there. Not only that, here you have the ruler of the midheaven being Scorpio. The ruler is Mars in the third house, fourth sign. Very strong ability if he needs to compete to get to where he wants to go. You know, so I think that is really strong. That's the much stronger case for ninth house ruler angular, ninth house ruler ruling the sun. The ninth sign contains the ruler of the chart. You know, and it is Saturn. He is Saturn. He's a Saturn kind of service guy. Yes, when he went to the northern hemisphere, the Saturn went into Pisces, and one of the first things he did was he, washed the feet of the prisoners, okay? Because in the northern hemisphere, it's in Pisces, okay? So that makes sense, washing the feet, because Pisces represents the feet. But what I'm saying is the root must be strong. And the root here in the southern hemisphere is phenomenally strong. Exalted Jupiter, Mercury ruling the sun, and the Saturn ruler of the chart. That Mercury is just popping, okay? That Mercury is popping here. And the Mars is also very strong also. But, so all I'm saying is the Saturn is not just a Saturn. It is the ruler of the chart. So it's going to determine the life direction towards the ninth sign, eighth house activity. Now, this is when he became ordinated as a priest. Obviously, this is not a trivial event for a person like Pope Francis. It is going to determine the rest of his life, okay? And you have the nodal axis at that time going over his Saturn. Why is this important? I'm saying This is important because see, he's being put on his life direction because Saturn ruled the chart. If this was northern tropical and Saturn ruled the 8th house and the 7th house, what would you say? Is meeting somebody important and getting into a partnership? No, here Saturn rules the chart and the nodal axis is going over that Saturn. He's making a life decision, a destined decision to go in his path, his life direction in the 9th sign and the 8th house. And at the same time, you have that Saturn that is going over the midheaven at that time with Jupiter. So very, very strong, very, very strong. I mean, I wouldn't say the transit of Jupiter here is about getting to ecclesiastical service at all. That's not what we would normally say. What does 4th house have to do with getting into religion, religious order? Okay, but definitely the nodal axis going over the ruler of the chart is showing life direction change happening, and that's very, very strong. When he was elected to be the Pope, what was happening? 13th of March 2013 was the day that it happened. And I'm using the Southern Tropical chart here again. You can see Venus going over the Saturn, all right? I mean, this sign up here is, there's a lot of things going on here. Sun was going over the Saturn also around the time of the, voting process. Sun was transiting the Saturn. Venus went over the Saturn. And you also have here, most notably, you have the Pluto on the Mercury, that incredibly relevant Mercury, the power that he's having access to. Now, again, I'm going to say, you know what an outer planet is trying to do for you by looking at its ruler in the chart. Here you have Pluto in the 1st house, and it is ruled by the Saturn in the 9th sign, 8th house, a life direction to give up something for the 9th house activity, all right? That Pluto power of personality was going over his highly important Mercury, which is giving him prominence because it rules the sun. It rules the Saturn, who's the ruler of the chart. So that is incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. And a few days subsequently, he would have had Mercury again connected to, the Venus and the sun. Everything was trining the ascendant at that time anyway. But the main point I'm trying to make here is the Pluto contacting the Mercury to the degree. It had nothing to do with Jupiter here. It was all that Mercury ruling the 9th house and ruling the sun. That's the power that he got. And that you can see in the Southern Tropical Zodiac very clearly. So again, just to emphasize that I'm proposing the use of the Southern Tropical Zodiac, where you're flipping the signs from the Northern Tropical solar month, because for people that are born in the Southern Hemisphere, as you've seen, it seems to be working out much better, or at least things are more obvious, even by transit. Okay, so the natal promise becomes more defined, it becomes more clear, it becomes much easier to work with. So that's what I'm proposing. And my view of holistic astrology is to use both Vedic, which is a fixed paradigm, and Western tropical, which is a fluid paradigm, together for the best results. And that's the view that I've got. That's the view that I'm proposing, because we have to start coming together. And my point is that if you look at charts, if you're born in the Southern Hemisphere, flip the signs in your chart and have a look at your birth chart, have a look at your sun sign, see what is actually happening in your life. See what is actually happening in your life, as opposed to, and the best people to talk to are people that are not astrologers, because astrologers, I find, they start living their life based upon their chart. And so there's a lot of resistance there. But for people that are not astrologers, when you speak to them about this, and you explain things to them, they really understand it, and they can see that in their life, it's naturally. Your sun sign, for example, should be something natural to you. It should be something you can become known for. That's what the sun is about, okay? So look at it. Take a second look at the charts that you've got of people that are born in the southern hemisphere or that are living in the southern hemisphere. As I demonstrated with the chart of Pope Francis, the root must be strong, okay? The root must be strong. And you saw the importance of that Mercury and the exaltation of the Jupiter along with it. If you would like to participate in this research that is ongoing and to help me or to contribute in any way with chart data of people in the southern hemisphere or chart data of people that have been born from the northern hemisphere that have moved to the southern, or people that were born in the southern hemisphere that have moved to the northern hemisphere, or you just want to help me with data collection or data maintenance or data analysis, and if you're good in statistics and those kind of things, please contact me. I'll be very happy to talk to you about your participation in the project. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.